Peter Bristol has made this exact walk every month for the past 4.5 years. He is a pioneer, the first person in the world to take part in a landmark trial of a drug designed to prevent Alzheimer's.
2 minutes still?
We visit Peter on the day of his final infusion of the trial, the 54th time he's been hooked up to an IV that either contains the trial drug or a placebo, something he won't even find out for another 2 to 4 years while he waits for the entire trial to conclude.
I don't think I could have signed up for the trial if I didn't feel as though I was going to get the support I needed.
Support from the Memory and Aging Program at Butler Hospital in Rhode Island, one of the top Alzheimer's research centers in the world. Dr. Stephen Salloway is the program's director.
The real reason we made any progress is because people are willing to volunteer to participate in research. And they're willing to put themselves on the line, put their body on the line, and be part of making a difference in the fight against Alzheimer's.
For Peter Bristol, the path to Butler is informed by the long and painful road his family has traveled. His mother, grandmother, uncle, and brother have all succumbed to dementia and Alzheimer's. His brother Jerry's passing in 2016, an especially difficult blow.
He set an example for me, and all I can hope is that I could live up to that example, that I could be as strong as he was. It's an awful, awful disease.
And Peter began to worry that perhaps the awful disease was coming for him.
It has almost 2 types of blooms.
A horticulturist by training who managed botanic gardens and arboretums in Chicago and Ohio, he began noticing troubling signs.
I had to know plants well, and I had to know their names well. And near the end of my career working, I was beginning to lose some of those names. I would look at what I thought was an old friend, and the name just wouldn't come to me.
His wife and study partner in the trial, Joanna, was also concerned.
We saw it running in his family. I had personally seen the impact when his mother got Alzheimer's, and we felt very much that we wanted to be part of trying to find an answer. Maybe Peter would be the first person to prevent it, and if possible, we'd like to be part of that.
So, usually together, they made the nearly hour-long drive from their home in Wakefield, Rhode Island to Butler Hospital once a month for those 54 months in the hopes of changing a fate that has devastated Peter's family and in the service of a greater good.
It's just too many people that are going to get it, and we got to stop it. Somewhere, that's why I'm here. We got to stop it.
Peter Wooding is here for the same reason, although he is in a different trial. He and his wife Joanne co-own an industrial design firm, and it was there she began to notice changes.
Peter was able to still be very, very good as ever in terms of his design ability and his eye, etc., but completely lost track of where the project was or when the next meeting was and what that was about.
Testing would lead to an Alzheimer's diagnosis and eventually to Butler and enrollment in a clinical trial. But for Peter, the details of that are already fading to the progression of his disease.
I think that I was starting with the placebo. I cannot remember why I think that, what the sequence of information really was at that time. Therein lies my issue. You're getting it firsthand right now.
My life has been turned upside down. Peter's life has been turned upside down. You know, we can no longer think about the future the way we used to.
Their once thriving industrial design business with prominent residential and commercial projects gets less attention now. They have sold their home, downsized to a condominium, reevaluated their finances, and are tackling the difficult conversations about what the future holds.
I have to start worrying about things like what happens if something happens to me, and you have to make plans for a contingency. about that. So you have to think about a lot of things that you really would rather not think about.
All of what the Woodings and Bristols are facing is what Dr. Stephen Salloway and his team at Butler are fighting.
We know there's fear out there about Alzheimer's. It's like cancer before there were treatments for cancer. We don't want people to be paralyzed by that fear. We want people to then turn it around and turn it into something good that's really going to make a difference. And the one goal is to build a citizen army to fight Alzheimer's.
And Peter Bristol there is in what's known as the A4 study. The design of that is to reduce the amyloid plaques in the brain, hopefully in people who are asymptomatic but have, like Peter, a family history of Alzheimer's.
And he won't even know if he received a placebo or the trial drug for several more years to come.
Right, because he was first into the trial, so he has to wait for the entire trial to conclude before he knows if he got the active drug or a placebo. However, right now he's moved on to the next phase of the trial, so he's getting the active drug, and if there's a benefit, he will benefit from it.
All right, fingers crossed. Detecting Alzheimer's with the prick of a needle.